Right. So we have Eugene Hedlund, and he is the founder of the School of Tribal Tantra. He's been teaching transformational arts around the globe since 2008. And tribal Tantra is a seamless integration of Kashmir. Is that it? How you pronounce it?
No. It's very important. It's Kashmiri Shaivism.
Shaivism.
Yeah, and if you can say it, then you sound like really advanced. And so that's why I did.
Kashmir Shaivism. There we go. Amazing. European shamanism, conscious movement, spiritual artistry, and quantum science. And today, as you guys know, our theme is authentic expression. And we're going to be talking about radical honesty. And we're going to be talking about, having amazing, honest conversations. So with that, Eugene, welcome to Amethyst Fest officially.
Great. Hello. Thank you for having me. Yeah, it's as I was trying, it's always like a very surreal shift to be, I'm in Stockholm, Sweden right now. I live about an hour and a half north of here, but I come to the city regularly to see friends and beloveds, and also just to be in the creative energy of life that happens in the city. It's like live in a forest. And so I was just in the city a few minutes ago having that experience of life, and now I'm in a hotel room with a lamp bent over into my face to have better lighting, talking into a screen. So this is the world that we've come to now. And actually, this same hotel is where I've organized some online festivals that were big, and so I did them at this hotel as well. So it's sort of a tradition. So it's the first time being part of another one. So thank you for having me. And I'll reiterate the the bio piece. Sounds cool. It was I come from I create a school of tantra, but it's actually a hybrid of tantra, particularly the Kashmiri Shaivism lineage, European shamanism. So it's like shamanism that's from the British Isles and from the Nordic tradition, and conscious movement. I was a 5 rhythms dancer and teacher, and then quantum science, because the mind isn't actually our enemy, it's an ally if we use it the right way. So I'm really keen on a holistic approach to things, and getting under the stories that we have to what's actually happening, and using anything, whether it's the esoteric or the scientific, to create threads of understanding. What are those energies that are under the impulses that are causing us to act in a way that isn't maybe in our best service, so that we can actually just create more ease in our life. So, when I was invited to this, and the topic was authentic expression, and the slot is about an hour, so I was like, okay, I'm just going to do a talk about truth, because I actually find truth really interesting. And it's not so much the, I know there's a very specific practice called, what was the term that you used? I forget, something around authentic expression. We use another term. There's a specific one that's like this sort of impulsive blurting out everything that you might want to say, and then calling that, sort of more spiritual. But I find as humans, we're constantly shifting from one extreme to the next to try to solve things. And that's why we keep digging a bigger hole, because there's a middle ground where things that seem opposite actually support each other. And that's sort of what as a tantric, that's something that we spend a lot of time tuning into, is the third path, the third way of being, where we're not choosing between seeming opposites, but actually finding where, if we zoom back far enough, where those two things can meet and actually support each other without canceling one or the other out. So there's a bunch of words. Let's take a deep breath together. So um, the the theme of the talk is our truth as an act of generosity. And I find it really interesting, instead of leaning into, what do we need to do to express ourselves authentically, or why don't we own our truth effortlessly, to actually be curious, how did we get here? Like, what is it that's in the way of simply being with that which is authentic for ourselves? And there's a lot of surface level conditioning that we may be aware of, but there's actually a deeper imprint that many of us have that we may not even realize is still in there on some level, operating the show, which is some of our initial programming around our relationship to life itself, relationship to whatever our concept is of the divine, this life versus the afterlife. Because whatever we may imagine we believe now, most of us receive some really early programming that we may not realize there's still threads of in the background that are operating. So most of the major belief systems teach us that there's a creator and a creation, and they're separate. And so this life is some sort of a process of proving our worth to actually be alive, proving our worth to be in the field of love, to have an afterlife. And it doesn't actually matter the details of what our belief is. That initial program that says you're separate from life itself, your life is temporary, and that you need to earn it, tells us that there may be aspects of ourself that are right or wrong. And most of those systems of belief have like lists of things that you should do all the time and things that you should never do, because if you do that thing or have that thought or that emotion, then, you're separate from the divine, you're separate from love, you're separate from life, you might even be cast out. And so sometimes we update part of our belief system, but there's still something deeply embedded in that still believes and sees the world through a right-wrong view. And a lot of the stories and the mythology that we've been given from, religions, but also just in art, have really idealized the concept of sacrifice. So if you give up yourself, that is the most loving thing you can do. If you give up your beliefs or even your life, then that is the most loving thing you can do. So there's so much programming that we receive from art, from leaders, from clergy, from our parents, from society, telling us that it's not about you being you and standing for that. It's actually the most generous things that we can do in life is to give ourselves up, to give aspects of ourselves up. And then we just sort of accept that. Like, what are the things about me that have to be removed to be worthy of love? Take a deep breath. And so as a tantric or shamanism, a lot of these not new, but old experiences of practices where we have a relationship to the divine that doesn't come from a separation between ourselves and creation itself, but actually another possibility is that everything comes from a single source, that there was one source of all things, and then from that emerged all this, including the cosmos, including you, including the divine itself. Everything is from a single source. And if we believe this, or we open to this possibility, then nothing can be excluded, including you, including your thoughts, including the nuanced aspects of self. Everything is of the divine because everything came from that same source, including divinity itself. And so some of us begin to have practices and say, I believe this. And we talk about it. And we say, yes, we're all one. And we have really cool new phrases and really cool new shirts that we wear and things that we say on Facebook. But we're still not living it because we haven't upgraded the old program that was planted in there that just runs in the background like an old friend sitting on our shoulder, constantly doubting if we're okay, constantly saying, maybe everybody else is all connected in the oneness, but because you have that thought or you have that belief or you have that desire, if people knew that about you, then they would keep you out. You would be separate. Yeah. And so there's a lot that is running in us beyond just the interpersonal and our desires and our fear of separation on a very intimate level, but actually just from very early programming that has told us you are separate and you must prove that you're worthy of connection. And until we recognize that even if we've updated what we imagine as our belief system, until we go back and say, I actually have to reprogram this old story that I've digested, then we're going to continue to filter everything through this lens of ultimately, I'm separate from creation. Ultimately, I still need to be worthy of love, even though a part of me is beginning to embrace the new belief system, but I haven't actually taken it in all the way. Yeah. So, another deep breath. And the thing is, like, it's when I started to first unravel this, and my mind was like, oh, that's great, I get it. And it's wonderful because we understand concepts and we breathe them in, we go, okay, I got it now, and everything's going to change. But unfortunately for people who have to go through the process, and really fortunate for people like me who sell workshop tickets, it actually takes some effort to unravel all the, all that's been wound up, because there's the early programming, but there's also all the things that we've learned since then that have caused us to really doubt ourselves. So there's the core belief system. If I believe that I'm separate from creation, then actually none of this will make sense. And if I believe that we're all from a single source, then my concepts of being separate, and therefore, as we'll get to, the concepts of sacrifice and denying my truth to have love, are actually irrational. But that's still up here. There's also something happening in our body. There's all the things that we've learned along the way, and there's all of our desires and fears. There's the there's the physical survival, but there's also our emotional survival as a tribal species, as a pack animal, that on any level where I have doubted my worthiness, if I feel on any level that I'm not worthy of all this love, then I will continue to effort my way into connection, to effort my way into love. Yeah. And that's when we access, consciously or unconsciously, all the programming we've received that says we're not worthy. You've got to figure out what are the things about you that are wrong and fix them. Or you've got to figure out what are the things, that are wrong about you and hide them. And people really do. Like, they get really good at hiding the things. And it's actually like, I don't know if it's more of a comedy or a tragedy. It's elegantly both. That in this thing where we're creating the most separation is actually where we're the most connected, because everyone's doing the same thing. It's like no one ever has anything new to say. We have the exact same wounds, the exact same stories, and the same masks. It's just like a slightly different color. Some have feathers and some have sequins. But ultimately, it's the same stuff, which is we have a physical experience at birth of going from total connection, like our physical body. And again, this is, I weave between the scientific and the esoteric. So as a tantric, but also the other great practices, we teach to the body. We teach how to embody these experiences, not just have them in our mind. for many reasons, one of which being it's the most efficient way to learn. The most efficient way to learn these very esoteric teachings is actually in your body, because your body's already living them. Your body doesn't need to learn the concept of non-duality because it's already living it. Your physical body is receiving information from your emotional body. It's receiving information from your energetic body. It's receiving information from, all the passing thoughts and the luck and the coincidences that make so much sense until our mind starts explaining them. That's the magic of life that we're experiencing all the time. And your body doesn't question it. Your body knows I'm separate. I have a form and it has an ending and has a boundary. And I'm connected because it's receiving the information from all these other sources all the time without judging it. Your body has also had an experience before birth of actually being physically connected to another being and its own being at the same time. So there is even a physical reference point in your body to being sovereign and physically connected, like fundamentally life and death connected at the same time. And then my physical body and all my less dense bodies goes through this extreme experience of birth into form, into all this mess, with lights and noise and, screams and Trump and all the things that, that we were like in the womb, and it was so great. And so we emerge out, and so our body has this moment of experiencing separation, which is real. It went from total connection and sovereignty at the same time to I'm separate. And through the other bodies, it can still feel connected, but now my physical body is actually separate from everyone else's. And that's the moment when our ego mind is birthed to actually save us from that extreme experience. And we need it with which to function in life. If I don't have a sense of separation, then, I won't eat food. You can eat food for me, but that doesn't actually work for my physical body. So I need that sense of separation to survive. But because the sense of separation is so extreme, that aspect of ourself doesn't take on the role of I'm here to remind you or to teach you how to function separate while reminding you that you're connected. Instead, it says, I am you. That sense of separation starts to become the identification of self, which ultimately is our identity. Our identity is I am this and not something else. And the sense that I must identify what that is in order to survive and thrive and to, hopefully have some of my preferences met along the way. And so once this comes into being, at a certain point when we become more cognitively aware, like children early on, before they're so aware, and some of us, we get it really early, and some we get to be creative for longer. Children will just express themselves, they'll emote, they'll move from one extreme experience of life to the next without holding grudges, without holding stories. They just move through effortlessly. And then one day their parents, are kind enough to tell them that it's not okay to express certain feelings, that certain ones are good and other ones are not, to not be curious about things and be very serious about the important things of life. And so the world gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and we start to create more and more of the sense of identity. But what we learn is, hey, wait a minute, there's parts of me that people don't like. There's parts of me where people who, maybe it's not even that I love them or like them, like they're responsible for my well-being. They give me food and shelter, and I'm 4 years old. And when I say and do certain things, they react to it in ways that are telling me, and this is whether you were a rebellious kid or not, it doesn't matter. That was how you reacted to this information. But we all got the information saying some things you do and say and believe are more lovable and some are not. And actually, based on that, we might bring you close. We might love you. We might give you more affection, but we also might push you away. And that's just within the home. And then we get to, in these formative years, we continue to receive more and more and more of this information. Now there's other little big-headed kids walking around, and I say something and they react to me, and then their parents react and the teachers react. And so it doesn't matter the details. The details is what we get lost in because we want to tell our story, and we all have such a unique and amazing story to tell. But under all those stories is the exact same information. We all get the same information. It's not okay to just be you. Some of you is wonderful, some of you isn't. And you will receive more or less love, more or less, toys or food, whatever it is that we received based on what you do and say. And this is, a very powerful imprint. And it doesn't matter what, our belief system is. And most of us were raised at that same time with one of the belief systems that says you're separate from creation. So on top of all that, now you're worried that, the angry God is watching you, even, reading your thoughts, and, oh, it's a horrible thing that you just thought there. It's like, wow, so we're a mixed up mess. And then you go to high school, and now eros and sexuality and all that comes in, and there's all these new thoughts and new emotions and new desires, and you get another heap of information about all the things you're supposed to do and not do, and none of it is, wow, enjoy this new power and, experiment and, come into your power in life. It's again, a lot of fear, a lot of desire, a lot of control. And so by the time we reach adulthood, and we are in the story of self that, like, I am an adult and I've done what I have, and I have my thoughts and I act from my free will. We're nowhere near an original thought, because we're nothing but a series of patterns and reactions to survival level of, stimuli of our physical body, but also our emotional body, our need to connect, our energetic body, like, what do I do with my energy? What do I do with my eros? Because it seems to create a lot of reactions in other people based on what I do. So there's like no room for us to even consider being ourselves, and then now you've got to pay bills and everything else. So like this is the wonderful way that we start. And then, maybe it's early, maybe it's 20 years down the road, we discover yoga, we discover dance, we discover tantra, we do some workshops, we hear some new information, now we've got it all figured out, and yet the same patterns repeat. And it's because we've got a lot of old programs that need to be undone, and just taking in new information doesn't suddenly negate that. And so that's what we want to talk about, not just like speak your truth. It happens all the times in workshops. You get to the end, people stand in the center, they proclaim something, everybody cheers, we all feel good about ourselves. 2 days later, the old pattern is still there. And so people either disappear, they say, well, that doesn't work, or they become workshop addicts. And, that's really great for some people's careers, but it's not actually helping the world. And so I'm interested to say, what is it we need to do to actually change things? And we actually have to go under the stories we tell ourselves and say, wow, with all humility, I have been programmed to believe that my truth could separate me from everything I desire. I have been programmed to believe that I need to consciously consider the outcome of every possible action. And this is even taught to us as virtuous. Sacrificing yourself is a virtue. You should slow down and really consider what other people will think and feel before you act. Like, everything is telling us, don't ever rush into being you, but only consider how it affects others. And then we just accept it. We're like, wow, yeah, that's really reasonable. And if you come from polite countries, it's just like, it's the only possible way to be. It's like, well, we're polite. We're nice people. What's a nice person? A nice person is someone who just kind of doesn't offend anyone. That's the worst thing in the world, is to offend someone, especially now. Geez. And so how the hell are we ever going to express our truth when we're so afraid of mildly offending another person? So I'm going to take a breath here. So recognizing that on all levels, from basic survival to interacting with family, friends, lovers, from, before lovers was even a concept, from when we were very young, and then continued to pay forward through our lives as we included more social interactions, and then our core relationship to whatever we have as a story of the divine has encouraged us as an act of purity, as an act of virtue, as a survival mechanism, to lie, to never consider what may be the distilled truth of self, but only how it affects others. And there's so much positive reinforcement around that. We are constantly receiving positive reinforcement when we do exactly that. And so it is exhausting, actually. Like, it's exhausting. And I remember the first time that this sort of distilled to me, and that's when I say it's like a comedy and a tragedy at the same time. We have this independent awareness of self, and we yearn to connect with other people. And we have a fear of not connecting with other people. And so it's a very rational thing that we do in that moment. I want to connect with you. I'm afraid I can't, because there might be something about me that is offensive, because I've observed that when people are offensive to others, they move away from each other. So since I want to come closer to you, I'm going to scan myself. I'm going to make a list of all the thoughts and all the feelings and all the desires and all the preferences that might be offensive. And I'm going to hide them away. And then I'm going to think of all the things that might actually bring me more connection, and I'm going to try to amplify them. And this is what people do. And it's not a conscious thought. No one would ever sit down at a desk and go, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start cutting parts of myself and hide them away. We do it subtly. We do it without ever thinking about it. It's in that moment when someone asks you, if you're like, a spiritual person, and you have learned that you must be a vegetarian to be accepted in this society, and you secretly like bacon, and somebody new that you meet that you're attracted to asks you, are you a vegetarian? You're like, oh yeah, of course. It's like these moments. It's just one example. There's so many little things. That's a very big one because it's very serious. They're just right. I say in jest. But it's these little moments where we outright deny something, or we just kind of don't, we don't bring it up. And then we get good at it. And what we're doing is we're sacrificing aspects of ourselves. It's like, I desire you, I desire this connection. And so I will give up something of me. You don't even know I did it half the time. But it seems like a good idea, because remember, in our art, in our mythology, in our biblical stories, like, sacrifice is always there. You sacrifice for the good of others. You give up yourself. So it's actually a very simple thing for people to do without having a lot of cognitive energy going into it, to just simply go, yes, for the greater good of all, I will deny this part of me, because that's a good thing to do. It's good for us to sacrifice ourselves. Yeah. And so then we have a world of people who have a little secret bag of self, and then they have a big hologram of self. So they're walking around. That's why their bodies are all twisted up, because they're exhausted. They've got their heavy bag of self that they're hiding back here, and then the hologram that they're holding up. And it's exhausting. It's like, see the hologram, because it's lovable. And then what happens? It works. People see the hologram. They're like, wow, you're lovable. You're wonderful. And they're like, yeah, that's great. And they imagine, I'll show you the hologram. You'll love that part of me. And then one day I'll be like, surprise, look at all my skeletons. But it doesn't work. Because then it's like, wait, you lied to me about you. And so what happens is the worst thing possible is to actually get the love that you seek through your hologram, because now you're committed to even more energy. And now that we're invested, now there's loss. It's like, oh, it was bad enough when I was hoping to get love, but now that I have love, now I have to work even harder at hiding the stuff and holding the stuff up. And then what do? We move people in, we start to see them all the time. So it gets harder and harder to hide our secret self, and harder to keep, the hologram self up. And then when we talk to our friends, we're like, we've been together all this time, but I don't really feel like they see me. No one ever sees me. It's like, yeah, have you ever shown anyone you? Of course they don't see you. We see what we show. And it's like, well, but these things about me aren't lovable. So I've sacrificed them. And what we've done is we've created a scenario where the love we desire, the connection we yearn for, is impossible. It's impossible. None of us are that clever. When we have committed so much energy to hiding parts of ourselves and projecting parts that may or may not even be true, we don't see through that. We see what we're shown. And when everyone's doing it, it's just normal. And so we filter that way. We filter through the expectation of, yes, we put on our special date suit so that we can fall in love. And then then we hide away in the skeleton and hope that no one ever, looks there our whole life, while secretly suffering because it's exhausting, that yearning to be loved. And it all goes back to the early programs, because for me, it's like the most humorous when I'm around conscious community, people who are, they're yogics, they're tantrics, and they're all talking about oneness. They're all talking all this stuff, but they're still doing the same thing they did before they got there. And it's like, wait a minute. If you believe we're all one, if you believe we're all from the same source, if you believe that you are whole and complete, then why are you excluding yourself to have love? It doesn't even make sense anymore. You claim to believe something else, and yet you're still operating the old program that says, I have to exclude part of me to include all of me, which doesn't make any sense at all. To be worthy of love, to be in the field of full inclusion with love, I have to sacrifice aspects of myself. Yeah, deep breath. So the way to experience the most magic, the most love, the most ecstasy, the most, of everything that is possible in this lifetime is actually not through efforting, which again is another whole thing that we've been, taught is virtuous, and it's in all of our language, no pain, no gain. Like we constantly provoke and test anything that feels good. Like, yeah, if it feels good, I don't trust it, and it's like when someone really loves us, we want to provoke them and test them. But if they hurt us, we believe it. Like, oh yeah, hurting me, that's true. Loving me, I don't know. What are you really up to? And so what gives us the capacity to feel the most is actually when we're in a relaxed state, when we're in a state of ease. So we've associated effort as being virtuous and relaxation as being lazy. But this is an extreme. This is the non-action to the complete rejection of action. But we're not talking about that. We're actually talking about a very active state that just isn't effortful, isn't exhausting. So, again, remember this, all the holding up the projections and hiding self, that's a lot of effort, And you think about it, and any part of you that resonates, like one of the ways that I found to get through this was, not just conceptualizing it and embodying it, but actually laughing at myself. Like, wow, it is humorous that I'm investing so much energy into hiding myself and telling another story and then screaming, why doesn't anyone see me? Like, it's actually a humorous thing. And then if you can see that everyone else is doing that too, it's like, wow, this is where we're really connected. And our natural state, before we received all this information, was to actually be in ease with what is. Now, that doesn't mean that everything was always happy. It doesn't mean that things were lazy. It just means that we didn't attach so much meaning to our experiences, Because this is what happens. We have a feeling. Instead of just feeling the feeling, we say, what does it mean? And what will happen if I express the feeling? And what will that mean? And then we're nowhere near the feeling anymore. Same thing with our thoughts, same thing with our actions. And so then that brings us out of ease. We're far out of the relaxed state. So if we recognize that our thoughts, our emotions, our eros, all these are energies. And energies don't need our help to move. They actually need our ease to move. They want to move through us. And if we want to feel the most that we can in life, of all things, including ecstasy, including love, we need to be in an easeful state. To be in an easeful state, we need to be in an accepting state of what's happening in here. And people talk, they throw the term self-love around all the time, and they think that it's a declaration. They think that it's doing something. I'll take myself to the park, and then look at the tree for an hour, as an act of self-love. It's like, no, you don't have to do anything to love yourself. You have to actually just accept what's there without wanting to change something, without wanting to sacrifice something, without wanting to remove something, without feeling like there's something that needs to change about me to be worthy of love. Because love is the state that is already here. It's not something that we have to chase or earn or look for. And so when we come to that state of ease and being with, the love already exists. So if we want to love ourselves, it's not doing something to improve ourselves, it's actually finding ease with ourselves. Yeah? Take a breath. And when you are in a relaxed state, then you have more energy to be with all the things that are there. So coming back to this title, the talk, that, truth as an act of generosity. So imagine you're with, let's say, intimate relationship is where these things come up the most. You're with a new lover, an old lover, doesn't matter. You're with a beloved. And we have those things that we don't want to reveal about ourselves. It could be something from the past. It could be a desire, a curiosity, whatever it is. There's something that we're not saying because we believe that it might cause harm. So there's that, it's I'm taking responsibility for your reactions. Or we're so attached to an outcome that we fear or that we desire that, again, we sacrifice ourselves, we give up ourselves to try to control the situation and have that outcome. So if I'm not speaking my truth, if I'm not revealing myself completely, then a lot of things happen. One of them is I have to commit a certain amount of my life force energy to holding that in. I cannot relax completely. If you've ever been in a state where there's something you're afraid to say to someone, were you relaxed? There's like a background dialogue. There's a high anxiety that happens when we have something that we're afraid to share or that we're afraid is going to be seen. And so we're in a non-relaxed state with this beloved. But if we remember that the way that we can feel the most with someone is from a relaxed state. So the thing is, we're also very sensitive beings. Whether you would call yourself sensitive or not, your body is very sensitive. We can pick up on all the nonverbal information, all the dialogue that's happening. So when somebody, a stranger, let alone someone you're close to, is in anxiety. And then what happens in you? You begin to respond to that. So I feel that there's something off. And so now something goes off in me because I'm resonating with it. And because I don't know what it is, now I'm in a background dialogue trying to figure it out. So now we're both anxious. Neither one of us is relaxed. So we have limited the capacity to feel ourselves and each other. We've limited the capacity for love by not speaking the unspoken. If we want to have the maximum capacity to feel our emotions, to feel eros, to feel love moving between us, we need to be in a relaxed state. So everything you're not saying is limiting the capacity of love to move between us. Everything you're not saying is limiting the capacity for us to feel each other because we're moving into those anxious states of being but we justify it based on either I really want this outcome, so I'm afraid of saying something, so I'm going to control the situation, or I'm not going to say this thing because it's not a lovable thing that I'm going to say, and I want to be nice. So I'm going to sacrifice this part of myself, or I'm going to save you. Which this one we put a red bow on it all the time. We say, I'm not going to say this thing because it might hurt you. It's like, that sounds really nice. Let me translate that. You're too small to handle what I'm going to say to you. It's not so loving when we say it that way, though, right? I'm going to take responsibility for your emotional well-being because I recognize you couldn't handle my truth. So I'm going to actually withhold myself as an act of love to you. It's not really all that loving to see someone through the lens of you can't bear to experience that which I actually am. The most loving state that's possible, the highest energetic state that's possible, again, is in relaxation, right? So the only way that we can get there is when everything that was unknown becomes known. To get there, we have to navigate our fear of what might happen when we say the truth. And the reality is, we may not receive the outcome that we desire. But we have to choose, do we prefer to control situations in order to try to have an outcome, or do we want to be in a state of love and ease? Because where we have the most relaxation and the most ease for energy to move between us is where we're both in our truth. Or if it's a group where everyone is in their truth. And it may be that once all the information is on the table, sometimes the thing that we feared saying brings us closer together. And sometimes it might bring us further apart. But once we're in right relationship with each other, once there's no more, background anxiety that's keeping us from actually relaxing, a lot of times, even if the outcome that we feared is the one that happens, there's also there's this big exhale on the other side, because I can actually come into ease with what is, even if it's not what I desired, right? It's like the scenario where, as someone that's, an open relator, and sometimes you meet someone new, and then it's like, we don't know this part of each other, and it's, I'm a non-monogamous person, and the other person might not want to relate with somebody where that's the truth for them. And so the outcome I desired was connection. Now I'm going to lose that outcome by speaking my truth. But I can also relax into being with them, because now we can actually meet as we are, as opposed to going down the road, hiding, a part of myself to try to have the outcome that I desire, but I can never actually relax into the full experience because we're constantly aware of the thing that isn't spoken. And so the reason our truth is an act of generosity for someone else is because it gives them the capacity to actually see us in full and to be with us in the way that is true for them. And then we can both relax and feel as much as possible in our right relationship, whatever that is. What I found beautifully is, more often than not, the thing that we fear to say, the thing that we fear to express that's going to create separation actually does bring us closer together, because most all of us are doing the same damn thing. Most all of us, like one person, that's the beautiful thing that you see sometimes happen in pairs or in groups. One person finally steps forward and speaks the unspoken. Standing there, sometimes you see that they're shaking, they're afraid, like, I'm going to get kicked out if I say this. And they say it, and what happens? The whole room fucking relaxes. Like, oh, wait a minute. You too? Like, I felt you, but I knew there was something I couldn't feel. I couldn't see it. Now I see it. And as soon as we go from concept, like, because we're sensitive. When we know there's something unspoken, what do? Do we relax? Like when you know someone isn't telling you something, do you relax and go, oh, that's okay, I'm not worried about it? No, you obsess on it. Even if you don't think you do, there's a part of your mind, because it's part of your survival mechanism. It's an old survival mechanism that you're not going to be able to turn off, that wants to understand what's happening in the room to assess whether you're safe or not. Like physically, it goes back to like hunter-gatherer days. And it's still there. So as soon as we're aware that there's something unspoken in people, there is a part of us that dedicates a lot of energy to trying to figure it out. And it will occasionally give you little answers like, I think it's this, I think it's that, I think it's that. You're never relaxed around that person anymore. And a lot of times, once they reveal it, even if it is something that would be troubling, there's so much relaxation that comes with it. It's like, wow. And now I see you. And usually, especially the longer it goes on, the thing that's unspoken, the scenarios we create get bigger and bigger and scarier and more intense. Whereas even a reality that might be challenging to hear, we can deal with it. Like we have so much resource to be with what's true. But we have no resources at all to be with what we don't know. We cannot relate on a social level around what we don't know, because we will obsessively try to figure it out the whole time as a survival mechanism. The only other way to be is to actually disconnect from the person. So when which we go like, I'm not going to figure it out. So you start to emotionally detach from that person, which is not a great relationship. And so it's generous to speak our truth because you help your friends relax and you create connection. Even if it is something that brings us further apart, we're actually more connected because we're relaxed into it. We're not spending time trying to figure out what the unspoken is. And you honor the reality that you're felt, you're seen. We feel that something isn't spoken. We feel your fear. We feel that we notice those little pauses when that topic comes up. Like we get all that information constantly. We go, wait, what was that? Why did you look away just then? What? Oh no, nothing. It's like, oh, no, it's not nothing. And it's challenging to have our sensitivity lean into someone and then be told, no, there's nothing. And so it creates more and more separation, even though you're trying to hold on to me. I'm trusting you less and less and less. So even if it's the most challenging thing in the world, the most loving, generous thing you can do, not just for yourself, but for everyone else, is just say it. And it's not that like impulsive, like I say what's on my mind all the time, not that filterless, but with love, with the intention to create connection. And if it is something that's going to be challenging, it's beautiful to actually lean in that way. It's like, you know what? I have something to share that I'm really scared to share. Maybe I've known you for 3 years and I've never said this because I want to be close to you and I'm really afraid that when I say this, it's going to push you away. And that creates a thread of connection because we all understand that. We've all done that. We've all withheld or exaggerated or denied because we were afraid of losing something. So it's a universal thing. And it's amazing how much capacity we have when we hear something, when we go from the unknown that we're creating stories around to the reality of now I know what the story is. We have so much capacity to actually be with that truth because we're relaxed. Like it's literally the truth gives us the energy with which to be with whatever that truth was. Whereas the non-truth is creating less and less capacity to be with you because the anxiety gets higher and higher and higher over time. Deep breath. So it's like such a simple concept. Just tell us the truth about you, reveal ourselves, but it's not. We're really wound up. And it's not just because of our fear and desire around connection, but to actually, the reason I prefaced with all the stuff at the beginning was as a way of compassionately recognizing we're not fucked up. We're not wrong. We're not afraid to tell the truth. We're not manipulative, people. We were programmed way before we had any recognition of what was going on to idealize sacrifice, to fear our truth, that it was a loving, good thing to do to deny yourself in any way that might offend or trouble others. And we have been bombarded with that. And it has hit us on a survival level. So you're not small and you're not fucking up for all those things now. You're doing exactly the best that you could do with that information that was coded into you really deeply for many, many years and has not been upgraded or updated at all. So recognizing, yes, my truth creates relaxation, ease, and connection, and my instinct to withhold it is something that's deeply coded in. And that's where I do my work. With my mind awareness, I can override that instinct when it comes up. With my practice, with my spiritual practice, with being in conscious community, doing the things that are bringing me into a more embodied sense of ease, over time, I can unravel that old story. And it gets easier and easier to just be in ease with being who I am. So that there isn't a dialogue around whether I will share who I am or not. I'll simply live as I am all the time, and there'll be nothing hidden anymore. But it takes time. It took us time to get here because we were so deeply programmed, not just from, parents in school, but like the television, like advertising, everything is saying, don't be you, be this. So just lovingly, and it's that recognition and the compassion for ourselves that can give us the fuel to actually do the work to unravel that, to say, hey, I'm worthy of love. If I believe in a single source, if I believe that I'm connected to all things, then that means I'm worthy of love. But believing it and embodying it is a different journey because I've been embodying the other information that I was given. So take the compassion and the understanding of how we got here as permission to learn over time at your pace, and then take the recognition of what we do and why as the tools to override those instincts when you catch them. I still do it to this day. I'll catch myself, especially if I find, maybe it's a new connection and it just kind of hits the emotional button right away and I get like instantly invested. And so I'll just very quickly, there'll be some little thing that I'll deny. And it's like, oh, damn, I did that. And I've already started to dig a hole. So I'll just kind of, want to quickly unravel it. Like we don't seek the state where we never go off center. It's just that we recognize it quicker and we give ourselves the compassion, understanding to adjust more swiftly. And then that gets easier and easier over time. Yeah. And my time? 8:56 or whatever time it is where you are. So that's it. The most generous thing you can do for others is to be you. Because when you're you, my sensitive self relaxes. And I can feel more of me and more of all my life simply by you being in ease. And if you ever want to help someone to relax, then you relax. And it might be that there's something you need to reveal to bring you into a more easeful state. Because we polarize, we resonate with each other. So when you're in ease, I come in ease. So your truth is your generosity. That's it.
Amazing. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Oh, I think there's some feedback here. Let me unplug. Awesome. Yeah, this was amazing. If everybody